Good Monday morning, Story Church. Thanks for joining us for this week's EpiVlog, our weekly follow-up to our Sunday morning sermon. Yesterday we looked at a sanitized faith. That's not a good thing. In fact, what we saw in Matthew chapter 15, verses 1 through 20, is that Jesus is addressing the Pharisees who are trying to add to the law. You see, they were sanitizing the faith. They were trying to add to what God had already given us, as if God's word wasn't clean already. They established some 600 additional laws to try to keep us from breaking God's law. And Jesus calls them out on it. They had this rule about washing your hands before eating. Not a bad idea, but it was never something that God had commanded for his people. What God commanded for his people is that we have pure hearts. And adding rules, putting a fence around God's word to actually keep people away from him, does not produce a purified heart. We can be clean on the exterior, yet very dirty on the inside. And so a sanitized religion is not the answer. And so I think as we look at this week and you're trying to live out the faith and you're trying to live out what Jesus is teaching in this parable, there are two things I want you to consider. First, what ways are you tempted to be the Pharisee? And we can see Pharisees in our churches. We can see Pharisees in the religious community even today. It just comes out in different expressions. Some people have certain ideas about what church has to be, or how a worship service has to go, or what people who are Christians can do in their actions. What can they ingest? What kind of movies can they see or not see? What kind of music can they listen to or not listen to? We do this to each other. We tend to judge other Christians and say, well, if you don't express your Christianity the way that I do, you're missing out, or we're afraid that they're going to slide down a slippery slope because they're playing with fire. And so I think we need to move away from that and see that that's the very thing that Jesus was trying to exterminate. And so what ideas do you have? In what ways do you express yourself as a Pharisee? And I think that's the first thing we need to identify. I'd love it if you'd share from your own heart where you struggle with that. But I think more importantly, and the big takeaway in this story, is that Jesus is a boundary crosser. He loves us. He would never put up a fence to keep us away from God's word. He would never put up a structure that would keep us from God himself. So Jesus is not a rebel for rebellion's sake. He's not going to say anything for shock value. Jesus longs to teach us what God is really like. And so he crosses boundaries. He moves past disgust. He says, look, there are certain people, there are actions, there are attitudes that disgust you. But watch me cross this boundary. I'm going to love them anyway. So what boundaries can you cross for the sake of the gospel? In what ways can you choose to love people whom you're tempted to be disgusted by? I think that's the big challenge for my heart this week. There are certain people that I just as soon not be around. Their sinful behaviors, or maybe the words they use make me uncomfortable. Maybe just the way they are in general. I tend to just want to stay away. And I have to examine my own heart this week. And so, church, I want to challenge you. In what ways are you a Pharisee? But more importantly, in what ways can you be like Christ? How can you cross that border? How can you cross that boundary and choose not to be disgusted by the sinful actions of those who are apart from Christ, and step into the loving behaviors of Christ as you're led by the Spirit this week? Hey, as always, I want to invite you to listen to this week's sermon. If you've not heard it yet, it'll be in the comment section below. And then also it'd help us out a lot if you would subscribe to our blog, and you can do that right there. So church, have a great week. I love you. I'm praying for you. And I believe the Spirit is working through you.